The rain had been falling since late afternoon, turning the winding roads of Mill Creek into silver threads under the dim glow of street lamps. The small Oregon town was used to such weather, but tonight felt different, colder, heavier, as though the clouds themselves had secrets to keep. Ethan Hayes sat in the corner booth of a half-empty diner, sipping lukewarm coffee. His dark hair clung to his forehead from the damp air, and his boots left faint water stains on the floor. He wasn't there for the coffee. He was there because he didn't want to go home, not yet. The bell above the diner door chimed, and a tall figure stepped inside, brushing off a dark wool coat. Even in the low light, she was hard to miss. Marilyn Carter, known to most as the widow, was a woman who carried an aura of quiet authority. Her black hair fell past her shoulders, her eyes a deep brown that seemed to see more than they lit on. She didn't glance around nervously like newcomers did. She moved with the ease of someone who had nothing left to prove. She ordered tea, exchanged polite words with the waitress, and sat at a booth by the window. Ethan had seen her before. Everyone in Mill Creek had, though few dared to speak to her. Her husband had died years ago under circumstances no one quite understood, and since then, she had become a figure wrapped in rumor and mystery. But tonight, something strange happened as she looked at him. Not a casual glance, but a steady, deliberate look, as if she were reading the edges of his thoughts. She raised her cup slightly, almost like a greeting, and Ethan felt an unexpected pull in his chest. It wasn't until the rain worsened that they found themselves speaking. Ethan had stood outside the diner, hood up, debating whether to walk the long road back to his rented apartment. The air was thick with mist, the street empty except for the distant hum of a passing car. Marilyn emerged from the diner, her coat buttoned, an umbrella in her hand. "Where are you headed?" she asked, her voice low but carrying easily over the sound of the rain. Ethan hesitated, then admitted he lived on the far side of town. She tilted her head. "That's a long walk in this weather. Come with me. I've got a fire going." Her cabin was on the edge of the woods, where the gravel road faded into pine shadows. It was the kind of place you wouldn't notice unless you knew exactly where to look. The windows glowed faintly against the dark, the kind of warm light that seemed to promise safety. Inside, the air smelled faintly of cedar and something sweeter, lavender, maybe. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, casting gold and orange across the walls. Ethan stood awkwardly near the door while she set her umbrella aside and hung her coat. "Sit," she said gently, motioning to the couch. They spoke for a while about small things, how long he lived in town, what he did for work, how quiet Mill Creek could be in winter. Her voice was calm, her tone unhurried. She didn't fill the silences with nervous chatter. Instead, she let them stretch comfortably between them. Ethan found himself watching the way the firelight caught the edges of her hair, the way her eyes didn't flicker away when they met his. It felt strange to be seen so directly. People didn't usually notice him like this. After some time, she poured him a glass of wine. He held it, not drinking much, the stem cool between his fingers. The conversation drifted toward more personal topics, loneliness, the way people pretend they're fine when they're not. Ethan admitted he didn't often talk to people about himself. Marilyn listened without interrupting, leaning slightly forward, her gaze steady. At one point, he laughed softly and shook his head. "This probably sounds stupid," he began, "but I've never been kissed." The words felt heavier out loud than they had in his head. He expected her to laugh, or at least look surprised, but she didn't. Instead, she regarded him quietly, her expression unreadable. The fire popped softly in the silence. Then she stood, slow and deliberate, and crossed the space between them. Her shadow fell across him, tall and warm against the flicker of the flames. "Let's start slowly," she said, her voice almost a whisper. He felt his pulse rise, but not in panic, more like the way you feel before stepping into the unknown. She was close enough now that he could see the faint freckles across her cheekbones, the fine lines near her eyes that hinted at a life lived in both joy and grief. She reached up and unwrapped the soft scarf around her neck, letting it slip through her fingers and fall soundlessly onto the couch. The air seemed to thicken between them, the rain outside a muffled backdrop to the moment. Ethan didn't move, barely breathed. Marilyn didn't touch him immediately. She simply stood there, her presence filling the space, letting him feel the weight of her nearness. Her gaze lingered on him in a way that felt both grounding and unsettling. He realized she wasn't just offering him a kiss, she was offering him trust, connection, the kind of attention he had never experienced before. And it made his chest ache, though he didn't fully understand why. Outside, the wind rattled the trees, but inside, time seemed to slow to the pace of her breathing. Ethan's breath caught in his throat as she moved closer. The fire cast soft, wavering light on her face, illuminating the calm authority in her expression. She did not rush, did not lean in like in the movie as she simply allowed the moment to grow, until the air between them seemed almost tangible. He could hear the rain sliding down the windows in steady rivulets, the faint groan of the wind in the eaves. She smelled faintly of lavender and the damp night air, a scent that made him think of summer fields and quiet evenings. Marilyn's hand rose slowly, the back of her fingers brushing against his jawline. The touch was warm, feather-light, yet it sent a ripple through him that made his chest tighten. She tilted his face slightly toward her, studying him as if making sure he was ready. Her eyes softened, and for a moment, there was no widow, no mysterious woman from Tona, just a human connection, raw and unguarded. "A kiss," she murmured, "isn't just lips meeting. It's a promise you keep for a moment in time." Ethan swallowed, unsure if he was more nervous or grateful. She closed the space between them until her lips barely grazed his. It was not the clumsy, uncertain thing he had imagined his first kiss would be. It was deliberate, slow, as if she wanted to teach him not just how to kiss, but how to be present for it. He felt her exhale softly against his skin, and instinctively, his own breathing slowed to match hers. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about the past or worrying about the future, he was entirely here. When she pulled back, her eyes searched his. She did not ask how it felt, she seemed to already know. Ethan was quiet for a moment, absorbing it, his lips tingling from the warmth of hers. "I didn't know it could feel like that," he admitted. Marilyn gave a small smile, one that hinted at both understanding and something unspoken. She moved to sit beside him on the couch, their knees nearly touching. The fire popped, sending tiny sparks upward, and the room seemed to fold in around them like a cocoon. She began to speak, her voice low and steady. She told him how she believed that physical closeness should never be rushed, that most people moved too quickly, chasing the surface without understanding the depth. She explained that connection was more than touch, it was about reading another person's breathing, their pauses, the way their eyes shifted. Ethan listened intently, realizing how little he had thought about such things before. The idea that someone would take the time to show him felt strangely intimate. Without breaking eye contact, she reached up and began to undo the buttons of her silk blouse. There was nothing hurried or suggestive in her movements, only an unspoken understanding that she was removing the barriers between them, both literal and emotional. Ethan's gaze flickered, but she steadied it with her own, as if to tell him there was nothing to be ashamed of in simply seeing. She let the blouse slide from her shoulders, revealing the soft curve of her collarbone, the faint outline of muscle beneath smooth skin. The firelight traced her form in warm gold, highlighting the strength in her frame, the quiet grace with which she carried herself. She leaned back slightly, not to display herself, but to allow him to see her without fear. "Touch is a language," she said softly. "One most people speak badly because they've never learned the words." She took his hand and guided it to her shoulder, letting him feel the warmth of her skin, the steady beat beneath. His hand trembled at first, but her calm steadiness anchored him. For several moments, they sat in that stillness, his palm on her skin, her breathing even and slow. Ethan felt the weight of his inexperience, but it was not a shameful thing here. She was not judging him, not rushing him forward, but teaching him that intimacy could be as much about silence as about emotion. Outside, the rain softened, the sound turning from a downpour to a gentle patter against the cabin roof. Time seemed to stretch and fold in strange ways, each second vivid and unhurried. Marilyn shifted closer, her thigh brushing against his. The contact was subtle but electric, a reminder of how little space now separated them. She spoke again, this time about fear, the fear people carry when they have been hurt, when they have been told they are unworthy of affection. She told him that fear often shows up as rushing, as trying to take instead of receive. Ethan felt her words sink into him like seeds into fertile soil. They made sense in a way that was less about logic and more about instinct. She leaned in once more, but this kiss was different, warmer, longer, carrying the weight of what she had just told him. Ethan responded more naturally this time, the stiffness gone from his shoulders. He let himself match her rhythm, learning through imitation and through feel. He felt the pressure of her lips, the way she lingered for a breath before pulling back, the way her hand remained gently cupping the side of his neck. It was not a kiss to claim him, it was a kiss to steady him. When they parted, she did not step away. Instead, she rested her forehead against his, both of them breathing quietly in the shared space. Ethan felt a strange mix of emotions, gratitude, nervousness, something close to awe. He had come in from the cold expecting nothing more than a warm fire, yet here he was, being taught a language he had never known he could speak. Marilyn's eyes opened slowly, and her lips curved into the faintest smile. "You're learning," she said, and the words felt like both encouragement and promise. They stayed like that for a while, exchanging few words. The warmth of the fire seeped into their bones, and outside, the night deepened. Ethan realized he wasn't thinking about the kiss anymore, not as a single event, but about the quiet comfort of being in a space where he was allowed to be inexperienced without ridicule. Marilyn had turned what could have been a fleeting, awkward moment into something grounded, something meaningful. And in that, she had given him more than just a first kiss, she had given him a new way to see himself.